Hey, welcome into the conversation. It is your host, Adrienne Lawrence. And today I am joined by the co-founder and CEO of Hey Jane, which is one of the first digital abortion clinics. Thank you so much for joining us, Kiki Friedman.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Kiki. So, this digital abortion clinic, I'm guessing, is this something new that's been sparked with the reversal of Dobbs, or is this something where you got out ahead of the action before the Supreme Court decided to go rogue?
It is something that we've been working on for a while, and before the fall of Roe, the idea came about in the summer of 2019 when I saw the final abortion clinic in Missouri, where I'd gone to school, nearly get shut down. So it sort of seemed that the writing was on the wall, that things were trending in a very dark direction. It seemed dystopian at the time to imagine one state with no abortion access. And of course, that's become quaint in retrospect, but we started fortunately working on it before this more recent urgent need came about.
And it's so incredibly cool, in part just because I like telehealth. I love medicine coming to my door as opposed to me having to go to hospitals or go to facilities or to deal with other people in the outside world. So to know that people can get this healthcare service as it concerns abortion via this digital mechanism, that is amazing. What did you have to do in order to get this in place for Hey Jane?
Yeah, so the first step is really just setting up our medical protocol. We know that these medications are incredibly safe and effective. The abortion pill has been approved for more than 20 years by the FDA. And so we just had to make some small changes to make it compatible with the telemedicine model. And then getting the word out, making sure that people know that this is an option. We saw even before Roe fell that more than half of abortions are done with the abortion pill. And yet today, still only 1 in 4 people know the abortion pill is an option. So we want to get the word out, make sure that people know this is a safe and effective and really important choice that many people can make.
Yes, and I know this is a powerful game changer for not a lot of people out there who may find themselves in a situation where they do need an abortion. And so if they are seeking your services, how does it work? Do they need to have health insurance? Can they just go ahead and submit a request? Fill us in.
Yeah, it's super easy. Patients will come onto our site. They'll get lots more information about what the treatment is, how it works with Hey Jane. They will do an online intake. They could do that 24/7. So after work, when the kids are asleep, whatever it might be. And within 1 business day, one of our really experienced and sympathetic providers will get back to them to confirm their prescription if appropriate. The medication then gets shipped to an address of their choice, usually their home, as quickly as overnight. And then throughout, they'll have access to on-demand support, clinical, but also emotional and social at the tap of a button to make sure that they're very well taken care of. In terms of insurance, we price at $249. That's less than half of the national average. And we do partner with some really wonderful abortion funds who can help offer financial assistance.
That's fantastic. That's really great that you have other mechanisms available for people who may not necessarily be able to afford it, but also that you're out there making it cost effective, because the reality is that especially in this time, it can be very difficult for people to absorb another cost. And so to make that accessible in terms of the abortion pill is absolutely fantastic. And I know right now that, there are a few restrictions in that the company, Hey Jane, that you're only really shipping to what? Colorado, Illinois, New Mexico, Washington, New Jersey, California, and New York, as they're the only states that allow telemedicine?
There are several states that allow telemedicine abortion, and we hope to be in all of them soon. We started with some of those larger states, and we'll be expanding quickly from there.
All right, fantastic. So there are more states out there that do allow it, right?
There are 19 states that have sort of preemptively banned telemedicine abortion, but many of the remaining are viable, and so we hope to get to them soon.
Yes, I hope so as well. I'm just so glad to hear that there are more than just the list of the ones, which I completely understand and very much appreciate how you've started, especially California, New York, some of the states that are most populated. I think that's fantastic. It allows you to reach a number of people. And it seems like also these states happen to be the ones that are most supportive in terms of abortion rights, which is also significant, even though it is incredibly unfortunate that we have so many states that we're still trying to get them to recognize our healthcare. And As far as I understand it, I know teleabortion, you said it was banned in about 19, 20 states in terms of getting that access. Do you know what's holding it up? Is it because they do have a larger legislation on the table that just outright kind of bans abortion or completely restricts it?
Yeah, so many of the states, as you might imagine, are those that have now implemented full or essentially full bans since the Dobbs decision came down. Most of them are just based in, of course, non-scientific beliefs around how the treatment works in order to withhold access to what is essentially what is essential healthcare.
Oh, it's completely unfortunate. Hopefully there will be change at some point soon, but we're very fortunate to have organizations like Hey Jane out there that can provide people with quick access. And so when it comes to public response, when you tell people, hey, this is what I run, Hey Jane, it's one of the first digital abortion clinics, what kind of response do you get?
So far, we have seen such an incredibly positive response. I have to say, I'm very grateful for that. I think people can slip into feeling a little bit hopeless right now. There's a lot of really bleak news out there in terms of the direction that access is moving. So I think being able to see folks innovating and trying new ways to approach, this unfortunately old problem can give, a bit of a bright spot within the broader ecosystem.
Well, that's great. I think it's something that we very much need. Although, hey, if anything's going to fuel people going into the midterms to vote blue and hopefully vote in a way that truly does make this Rovember, I will encourage that without a doubt. And so in terms of what you're doing with Hey Jane, is there something on the agenda coming up next other than trying to get into other states?
Yes, so our big focuses now are on finding ways to continue to expand access. Geography is a big part of that, and financial accessibility is a huge component as well. Finding new ways to both lower everyday cost and then partner with payers and other really important means of creating new channels for low-cost access. We've also found that the complete care model that we provide that does integrate this holistic clinical, emotional, and social support has been incredibly well received by our patients. We have patient satisfaction scores that are 10 times higher than the healthcare industry average. And so finding ways to potentially apply that model to other really underserved healthcare treatments that would benefit from this holistic support is something that's on our radar as well.
Well, that's wonderful. It does sound like you are expanding care options for people who need it, especially with these states out here trying to curb people's access to healthcare. And something I was wondering if you all had potentially considered it, because there are these larger organizations that are situated perhaps in states that can't necessarily get full access to abortion. If there is the possibility of having some kind of partnership with them where you're not in a position where you necessarily have to ship to a state where it's illegal, but even if you were to provide some kind of access or opportunity by way of partnership with these organizations or these companies in terms of the care that they're able to provide their employees.
That is such an important point. I think one detail that's often confused in this conversation is that it is still legal for residents of hostile states to get care in friendly states. We've seen states like New York and California, New Jersey go so far as to explicitly say, we will protect access for out-of-state patients who need to travel to our state. And so working with employers or other organizations within those hostile states to ensure that folks can get really convenient, fast, and affordable care once they've crossed those state lines is essential. It's of course ridiculous that patients need to go through those hoops in order to get care, traveling across state lines to access essential healthcare. But we hope that given those constraints that exist, we can make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, you're right. It is absolutely ridiculous. But hey, if an employer can foot the bill, whether it says, okay, we are going to have you go to our New York office, and it so happens there's a pill waiting for them, that's not a bad idea. Sounds like a good setup to me. Yeah, whatever needs to be done to get people this opportunity and this access. All right, so we only have a few more minutes left, but I would love to know when it comes to Hey Jane, what is the message that you really want people to receive when it comes to the services that you're able to provide and also what you stand for as an organization?
Absolutely. Well, the timing of our conversation is serendipitous. September 28th is International Safe Abortion Day. And so we feel it's important to just reiterate that abortion is necessary for bodily safety. We know that patients denied abortion care are 4 times more likely to be in poverty, significantly more likely to be in abusive relationships, and 14 times more likely to die from carrying an unintended pregnancy to term. So sustaining abortion access is necessary to safety in and of itself. And we now have these really wonderful options like medication abortion and telemedicine to sustain that safe access moving forward.
Yes, indeed. And that's a very powerful thing. And so again, very grateful for Hey Jane and the other organizations out there looking to hopefully dismantle this limited access to abortion care. As we know, it is healthcare and it should be something that all people can access. This is a humanitarian issue. This is an issue of people's healthcare, welfare, and we really need to focus on that and hopefully institute the change that is necessary. All right, so for those out there who are interested in Hey Jane, whether it's supporting the cause or maybe getting access to abortion themselves, where can they go? Where should they go to get more information?
Check out heyjane.com or on Instagram or TikTok at HeyJaneHealth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Kiki Friedman, co-founder and CEO of Hey Jane.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we have more conversation for you. Again, it's Adrienne Lawrence. And this time I have the executive director of United for Iran, Firuzeh Mahmoudi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrienne.
Yes, so I know that Iran and the conversations that are going around there and the protests, they are making headlines and waves right now. Can you tell us a little bit about what is going on?
Of course. As you know, the protest started with the killing of Gina Amini, a young Kurdish woman who was visiting family in Tehran, and the morality police arrested her. And while in custody, she was her skull was crushed multiple times. She was beaten, and then once she got out, quickly after she died. And that was a sparkle that started the current first protests, now movement and an uprising. And we are seeing for the first time to this extent women leading the charge, young women and young men, but women mostly, and unifying, galvanizing the country in a way we haven't seen. And although the Islamic Republic does what it can to pivot different groups against each other, the protesters have been incredible with their message of solidarity and support and backing of each other from city to city to make it very clear that they are one group fighting for the same cause.
Yes, and what would you say if you were able to summarize what that cause is? As I've heard a lot of talk about these morality type police out there, people feeling limited in terms of maybe if it's wearing a hijab or what they're doing, what would you say people are pushing for?
Though this started because of the morality police and the woman having to cover, the cause is much bigger than that. The hijab that women have to wear is just a symbol of oppression. It's a much bigger thing. It's about body autonomy. It's about basic rights. It's about gender rights. It's about anti-discrimination. It's about secular democracy. It's about a new future where everyone can lead the lives they want and have their basic rights honored.
Yes, and have it respected, most certainly. I really get the sense that in Iran, people don't want to go back necessarily. And it's more of progressing and going forward and staying the course, staying the path. And so would you say that that is definitely what the sentiment is in terms of those who are taking to the streets and uplifting their voices right now?
Absolutely. One of the chants that I saw today for the first time was, "Your bullets are few, we are many." People are putting their lives on the line and they are clear. They're looking at the camera. We have videos of some of the young girls that have died, and some of the messages are like, "I'm going to the street, we're going to do this. And they know what they're doing. They're not mincing words. We don't see fear in their faces. They are so brave. And what they're advocating for is a new Iran, an Iran where they can have their rights honored, absolutely. And in a way, the genie's out of the bottle. I'm not sure what the future exactly looks like. We can talk about that. And there's no going back in a way, because they have shed their hijab in a way we've never seen before. So many of them throughout the country, in every city, in cities that we haven't seen protests in before. And they're dancing in the streets, they're burning their hijab, they're climbing on top of cars and, waving their fists and advocating for change. And the government of Iran is already had its back to the wall. I saw a comic, a political cartoon that was very telling. It's no longer back to a wall, it's to the edge of a cliff. What they have created is a country that's based on oppression, based on oppressing women and forcing the hijab on them. The grandmothers of these young women that were in the streets during the revolution advocating for demanding that the hijab would not start were the bellwethers of this situation. They're like, hey, if they put the hijab on us, this is not just about a piece of fabric. They are able to effectively control half of the population. And if once that's normalized, it becomes normal in the rest of the country for everyone else. So when we have had this for 40 plus years, and now, and this is the identity of the regime, right? So oppressing people and using theocracy and killing their own kids, and not only kids, grandkids and great-grandkids. These are men in their 80s and even 90s killing folks. We call them Daheye Hashtad. They're born in the 80s, and it's currently year 1401 in Iran. So 70s and 80s. These kids are teenagers, then in their 20s, older folks too, of course. And that's where they're at. So absolutely, I don't think that there's really a going back, because they've tied their identity to the demands to oppression, and the demands are so clear that we will not stand for this oppressive regime anymore, that the amount of change that is required will no longer allow this regime to be as is.
That's very, very powerful. And I know you spoke of the grandmothers in the past, and I'm sure there have been uprisings before, but what's different about the response this time from the Iranians?
Each one has its own flavor, of course. This was a very organic movement. We're not surprised, but it just came about, right? It was a sparkle with Gina that led to this fire. And it is throughout the country, in smaller cities we've never seen. It's bold in a way we haven't seen. We're seeing teenagers literally taking their scarf off, walking up to the police and saying, "Don't you dare touch me," and just standing there strong. People have done this before, but to this extent and this caliber, where they're not showing fear, and if anything, you see the hesitation in the eyes and the bodies of the other side.
Wow. And so what are you hearing on the ground from friends, family? What are people saying?
The number of folks being arrested is a lot more than we may think, and we don't have the complete numbers, but we know more than 50 people have been killed, and more than 1,000 people have been arrested already. And a number of people without hijab is definitely also more than we're seeing in the media. As we know, the government's doing whatever it can to shut not only the protests, but shut out the rest of the world so they can do what they do best, which is persecute the people with impunity. So with the internet off and on being shut down, it's hard to get all the information, but it's really important to remember that what we're seeing is only a fraction of what's happening, and that we need to continue talking about this, that they're not going away, and we need to be their voice and not forget them. I remember in the 2009 uprising, this Iran's uprising was on the media all around the world until the day Michael Jackson died, and then immediately stopped and moved to something else. So we have to make sure that we keep them not only in our hearts and minds, but as part of the public discourse.
Absolutely, without a doubt, keeping that pressure on with that accountability of having the world see. I know that that can be something that is significant in terms of getting leadership to get right. And when it comes to the regime there, how do you think they're going to respond in the event that media coverage continues? Do you think it's going to take them some time before they realize they need to back down? Do you think what they're going to do is going to be just something superficial to placate people in the moment? What will happen?
A good question. What they usually do is shut down the internet, and they once the internet shut down, they're as violent as they can be. Right? They will. There are already over 1,000 people in prison. They torture. They threaten. They do whatever they can to instill fear. And that's the only tool really that's left for them. And this time, they're definitely at a crossroads, so they can continue doing that. And fear is no longer working. The people on the streets are fearless, so that's a really difficult position that they have put themselves in. On the other hand, like I said, if they let go and kind of give in to no hijab, then the whole identity dismantles. So there is that too. I think it's really critical also to remember for all of us advocating from outside, be it government officials, prominent people, whoever is talking about this, that this is a homegrown movement and those inside Iran are leading it. Those young individuals and are leading it, and that what we need to do is create space for them to do what they want to do and take the level of risk they want to take and stay in the streets and not in any way influence or try to influence and dictate how things should go or who should lead this movement from the outside.
Yes, absolutely. Allowing those who are advocates, protesters, uplifters, and resistors, and who've been leading the movement and lead the way in the conversation is critical. And so if people want to support, other than ensuring that it continues to get media coverage, is there anything else people can do from afar in order to lift up the cause?
I think it's really critical to stay informed, follow the leaders, stay up to date on what's happening, be part of the discourse, pressure one's government to act unilaterally, bilaterally, multilaterally to pressure Iran to do what we can. Those of us outside that have the abilities and are in the tech world doing what we can to make sure that access stays open as well with technologies as well as satellites and internet overall.
Yes, that is an incredibly important thing and something I think that we all can get behind because we know that transparency is key, especially when we're seeing a lot of dictator type governments popping up and even the United States being possibly under the thumb of one making that attempt. All right, so thank you so much for all of your insight. If people want to get involved in supporting United for Iran, what can they do?
They can go to our site and sign up. Our website's unitedforiran.org and find out more. And I want to end by saying that we truly are not liberated till all of us are liberated, and we are not liberated till women are liberated. This is all one cause, and we all need to be part of the struggle.
Absolutely, I completely and totally support that. And I'm also very grateful to have you, Firuza Mahmoudeh, Executive Director, United for Iran. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Adrienne.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bituation Room. The Bituation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week, so join the Frantifa and listen to The Bituation Room on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your TYT Network podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
Welcome everyone. It's Emma Vigeland and also me. I'm technically here. It's the Young Turks, everyone. I'm John Adirola, sitting in for Cenk Uygur, taking the spot of Anna Kasparian today. My old nemesis, Emma Vigeland. How's it going?
I prefer frenemy. If we're really gonna get into it here, John. Because we have our moments, but we're always battling one another like it's a Real Housewife situation.
That is true. We apparently, right before we went live, we were maybe in agreement on something regarding pop culture. We're gonna have to return to that during one of our social breaks. But I'm very excited to have you here. For people who might be new to the channel, to the network, you might not know that Emma worked here for a number of years. But since mid 2020 or so, you've been doing an amazing job at the Majority Report. And you also just a month ago launched another endeavor. You wanna tell us about that?
Sure, thank you. Very professional to seamlessly plug this, John. I started a
It's not seamless anymore, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've pointed out the seams. But I started a sports show called ESVN, and we do it weekly, Mondays on the Majority Report channel. And we also do a bonus episode where I give my picks against the spread for the NFL week. But for the most part, it's a leftist, pro-labor, pro-player perspective on sports, and it's honestly sorely needed given the barstoolification of sports and the macho culture that's surrounding it. So trying to provide some sort of counterbalance as well. You can check out that show if you so choose.
I actually didn't know that there was an ideological focus. I actually love that and kind of wish that I understood literally the bare minimum about sports to understand it. But no, I like that. That's actually awesome that you make that available and you have the bonus episode. For viewers, if you want my picks against the spread, it's available to tier 3 subscribers or whatever. Is that a D&D thing? I don't know. Anyway,
just send envelopes of cash directly to John if you want spread picks against the spread from him.
Anyway, very glad to have you here, especially because we have a great rundown of stories to get into. But we're gonna be starting off with the big domestic news story of the day. So why don't we jump right into this? What you're seeing there is a little sample of Hurricane Ian. And to be clear, the camera that is taking that video is 6 feet off the ground. And that's video when it was visible. It's been underwater for some time. Actually, here's a photo provided by Mike Betts about the normal view from that exact same camera. So just to put into perspective what the storm surge, what I believe right now is being called tied for the 5th worst hurricane in American history in terms of intensity of the wind. Hurricane Ian actually just hit earlier today, and following a period of rapid intensification, moved up to Category 5. I'm not sure at this particular moment if it's maintained that. It is expected that, of course, it will weaken over time. But the eye of the hurricane reached shore just after 3 p.m. Earlier today. This is Eastern time, so several hours ago. Yeah, it's considered one of the most powerful storms to strike the US in literally decades, and forecasters are warning of a lot of damage that could be done. There were warnings for days in advance of people, like how they should flee. Unfortunately, as is always the case, some did not. In fact, here's some footage of people attempting to swim in the storm surge. So I don't know if it was clear there, but there was initially a group of 3 men on the left side of the video. One's head went under the water and within maybe 2 seconds was thrown all the way to the far right-hand side of that. I understand there's always gonna be people like this, risk takers, daredevils. It is incredibly dangerous. Not only the risk of drowning, but in these sorts of storm surges, there is all sorts of toxins and pollutants in that water. Not only that, there's the threat of electrocution. There are a number of different dangers. And so I'm sure people facing the full brunt of Hurricane Ian right now know how bad it is and don't need another warning, but you gotta take this thing seriously. Emma, I'm sure you're much higher up on the coast, obviously, but I'm sure you've been following this. What do you think about this hurricane?
Yeah, and for everybody I mean, there are always going to be idiots who engage in that kind of stuntery where they're trying to swim or have a story to tell. But the majority of the people that remain in that area, or a good chunk of them, I should say, are people who probably have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Probably can't afford a flight. I know flights out of the area have been really spotty at best. And maybe just don't have the financial resources to leave. There have been stories of different employers, and I'm blanking on the employer's name actually, suggesting that, hey, maybe you could just stay here, stay overnight. We have air mattresses, and so we could keep the work churning out as long as you just shelter in place at your place of work. For a lot of people, there are not enough protections to allow them to stay out of work, to lose potentially wages if they don't have their salary guaranteed, and say they're a gig worker during this time period, who don't have the resources to leave, and also might experience water damage and effects from the storm on their actual person and on their home, but also will experience significant financial loss even if their home remains intact, right? This is devastating in a variety of different ways. And we're gonna see more and more of these, of course, as the effects of climate change begin to be more acutely felt even than they are right now, which is quite acute.
Exactly, yeah, and you see something like that, you see how these storms are getting worse, and the rapid intensification I talked about earlier is affecting more and more storms, so there's less warning that the storms are gonna be as bad as they are. That is why it is so indisputable at this point about how bad climate change is, which is why all Florida politicians agree that we need to be prioritizing dealing with the climate crisis. Just to inject a bit of sarcasm into the somber story. In any event, let's talk. Oh, by the way, thank you again for reminding people that don't lump the daredevils in with elderly people who can't just pack up and leave, the unhoused, a number of people. So that is a great point to make. Right now, at least when it hit, winds were over 150 miles per hour. Actually, you can see here a map of how bad the storm surge is going to be across a pretty wide area right there. 12 to 18 feet expected in some areas, which would be literally unprecedented at this point. Homes have already been destroyed. Boats were seen floating through streets in Fort Myers, which is where I believe that initial video we showed you was. But not just boats. Take a look at this. Yeah, that was a shark. And I believe this one's authentic. Every time there's a hurricane, people send out photos of a shark next to a car or whatever. That's not real. This apparently actually was. Although bear in mind, it's Florida, there's gators everywhere. A shark in the streets isn't as amazing as it would be in some other place, but still another reminder to not be in the water if you can avoid it. And for those who might be further inland, here is a map. It's one of the more recent maps I was able to find about the expected path of the hurricane, bearing in mind that is where scientists say it's going to go. You can take a Sharpie to it if you want, but that's not actually going to change the path of the hurricane. So bear that in mind.
Yeah, well, gators facing off against sharks. That sounds pretty like a badass actual movie plot, honestly, right? This is if this wasn't so serious, we could make some more jokes about this being the next step for the Sharknado franchise, but this is quite serious. And like when you see the path of the storm and the devastation that obviously it creates, I'm just reminded of the dumbest argument I've ever heard by King of Logic Ben Shapiro, that when climate change hits, people can just sell their houses if they're underwater. You just have to sell them, right? In the free market will service everybody equally. Yeah. People who are experiencing flooding in their homes, they might have a hard time selling them to somebody who isn't interested in underwater property. And the rest, of course, those kinds of conservative arguments are more tailored to who they're thinking about, which are, people who have vacation homes on the coast of Florida, not the regular people, working class folks who won't, of course, have that kind of option to just cut and run from their home.
100%. Yeah, so we're going to be tracking this throughout the rest of the week. As of when I last saw, over 1 million people were without power. That's probably going to get worse before it gets better, but we'll be tracking to see what happens. With that said, why don't we actually jump to a story that's thematically somewhat linked? For some time now, we've been worrying about this side deal that Joe Manchin, as well as some of his allies, Chuck Schumer in this case, were cooking up, where to secure Joe Manchin's vote for Joe Biden's climate bill that passed not too many weeks ago, he was going to do this fast permitting bill that had a number of different potential negative effects. And they were tying it this week to a need to pass bill that would continue the government being open and running. And for progressives, this was considered a line that could not be crossed. These things needed to be disentangled. And the progressives actually won. It's not something we get to say too often on the show. I relish it each time it comes up, and in this case, it did work, thanks to the amazing work of many different activist groups and individuals, literally hundreds of scientists who've been pressuring people in Democratic leadership. The great efforts, amazing speeches by people like Bernie Sanders and advocacy of people in the squad, those sorts of things. This was actually pulled out of the other legislation. And Bernie Sanders had a little bit of celebration on social media saying, I want to congratulate the groups and organizations who made clear that we do not need more fossil fuel projects that would substantially increase carbon emissions. The removal of the big oil side deal is a victory for the planet and a major loss for the fossil fuel industry. And he is both right to give the vast bulk of the credit to those groups, but also notice that he doesn't mention at all that he was working on this. It's a little bit different than some other prominent politicians that we could probably name. In any event, if you have not been following the path of this side deal, it's a good thing that at least for now it's been killed, because the bill would have mandated that all permits for instance, the Mountain Valley pipeline, a project long delayed by environmental violations and judicial rulings, be issued in 1 month. And it would have stripped away virtually any scope for judicial review, which was needed because of all of those violations. And thus they didn't want to actually continue a process wherein there was good research done, there was due diligence, just ram it through and continue to wreck the climate. And so thankfully, at least for now, Emma, that's not going to happen. Although, as we will get to in a couple of minutes, this thing could potentially rise from the dead.
Yeah, and it's a shame. It's a shame that for Manchin, he was unable to get this passed, get this through cloture, because perhaps he might at this point begin to reevaluate his stance on the filibuster. If he really wants these permitting this permitting bill provision to get through, hey, maybe you need to do away with the filibuster altogether to get it through, huh, Joe? So you don't need that 60 vote threshold. But of course, that's not going to be the case. That's some wishful thinking on my part. But you read what he had to say about why it was so necessary for this permitting reform to pass, and what it would do would be create a pipeline, the Mountain Valley pipeline, I believe, that would go through West Virginia, and I'm sure enrich himself in some roundabout way. But he talks about how the United States needs to be energy independent, and we can't kowtow to Vladimir Putin, and how our national security is at risk when we don't have energy independence. All right, let's do it then. Let's nationalize all of our oil and gas industry and our electric grid. I mean, you're saying, Joe Manchin, that it is way too much of a national security risk for us to not be at the whims of Vladimir Putin or the oil markets internationally, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, although we don't do business with them anymore for certain reasons. Why don't we just nationalize and then phase out the oil and gas industry altogether so that we don't have to be dependent on this international marketplace? Well, that's not what he's interested in. The reason that he's using a national security interest as a fig leaf for his desires is because this is entirely a self-interested project for himself. And that is how he operates as a senator. Yeah, for himself, but also for the sort of people that he cavorts around with, the people that he likes, the people that he cares about, the sort of people that are going to benefit from this. And you're totally right to point out what BS the national security argument is.
he clearly, in this case, because it's so important for national security, is willing to accept the cost that a pipeline like that would bring, including any amount of additional cardiovascular disease that it caused, the pollution and all of that. Those costs are acceptable. But they never use that for renewable energy. The actual, just an extra cost in dollars isn't acceptable for them, even though in theory, were we to do some sort of massive moonshot of solar or wind energy, that too could help us be independent from all of these damned international despots. But for some reason, they never get behind that. I guess there aren't enough solar panels in West Virginia. Honestly, let's start shipping them there. We'll set them up there, you guys can benefit, and then maybe we can get someone like Joe Manchin on board. In any event, for now, this is good news. It stops not only the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which we focus on both because the corruption is so clear, but also because it would have such a negative impact on our emissions overall. The estimates vary in terms of how bad it would be, but the estimates that I've seen say that it would, by being allowed to be built, it would reduce the overall climate benefit of the climate bill that was just passed by something like 20% for this one pipeline. So that's not acceptable, but it also would have, let's see, included at least 5 projects that produce, process, transport, or store fossil fuels, 6 that don't deal with fossil fuels, 4 mining projects as well, and would also cut down the overall environmental impact research period for projects going forward to a time where you can't necessarily do all of the due diligence expected. The issue, though, is that we haven't necessarily won totally. Joe Biden apparently still supports this and is willing to look for other vehicles to get it passed. Karine Jean-Pierre just said, I believe it was earlier today, that the president supports Senator Manchin's plan because it's necessary for energy security and to make more clean energy available to the American people. We'll continue to work with him. And so they're gonna do that. And there are a couple different ways that they might do that. Some people are saying they could attach it to the NDAA for when that needs to be passed, a similar tactic to this, which in theory could fail for the same reasons. But they don't even necessarily have to do that. They don't necessarily need all of the Democrats to support this. They can afford to lose some if they can gain some Republicans. And when the topic is fossil fuels, I bet they can figure out a way to get some Republicans on board. But what do you think?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, right now they're being quite vindictive towards Joe Manchin because Manchin had the gall to make a side deal with Chuck Schumer and not inform his buddies over on the other side of the aisle about that side deal. But it is quite rich to see Manchin kind of get screwed over by very similar tactics that he's used against the left for quite a long period of time. Before even the Inflation Reduction Act side deal was struck, Manchin had a secret negotiation with Chuck Schumer that said, despite, we were talking about Build Back Better, at one point Bernie was proposing 6 trillion, something like that. Then we were discussing if it should be $3 trillion. And all the while, Joe Manchin had this secret negotiation with Chuck Schumer that he was like, I'm gonna stick by a $1.75 trillion figure. So yeah. He was screwing over and not negotiating in good faith for months and months and months with the leftist side of the aisle in the Democratic Party. And yet now he's whining about not getting Republican support for his legislation and not getting Democrats on board as well for his own pet project. There's only so many times that Joe Manchin can screw over the rest of his caucus in a negotiation and that they completely back him altogether. If maybe he was operating, maybe he would have gotten his pipeline deal if there were, was the child tax credit included, if universal child care was included in what ended up passing as the Inflation Reduction Act, 1/9 of Build Back Better. But that wasn't happen. He delivered for his donors first, and so sad to say, Joe Manchin, you don't get your little pet project as a sweetener, as a dessert after you got delivered for the rest of for the people that actually serve you. So, too bad. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I'm sure right now he's crying himself to sleep on his yacht or something. But I would remind him, if you don't want people to say that some 2 things can be attached and then they actually split them apart at the last minute, maybe don't set the precedent of saying that two things can be attached and then splitting them apart at the last minute. That would be my advice to you. Anyway, we got to take our first break. When we come back, more news. We're going to be diving into the topic of abortion, as well as the continued normalization of political violence. All that and more coming up after this.
Ice cream.
Okay, everybody, let's see what's going on out there. I also have something I want to talk briefly about with Emma, so I think you'll enjoy that. But first of all, I do want to remind you that in a much less than 1 month from now, Unbossed with Nina Turner is going to be debuting. I know you're excited, but are you prepared? You could be prepared by going to tyt.com/unbossedtyt. You can subscribe, and then as soon as they launch, you'll be there for it. They're already putting up videos, by the way. Did you know that? If you didn't know that, you're missing them. But if you subscribed, you'd know. So go subscribe. Anyway, also we have this new shirt, Join the Thunder for the Dragon Squad. This is a limited edition version of it, an early access. We're messing around with different designs and stuff, and we like this one, we wanted to make it available. There are gonna be some changes on the eventual one. So if you want this Join the Thunder, it is only available for a limited time at shoptyt.com. Now that said, really fast, before we went live, Emma and I were talking about House of the Dragon and some of our issues potentially with this most recent episode. Really fast, what do you think about the recasting of the two main actresses?
Well, I mean, Olivia Cooke looks very similar to the younger actress that plays Alicent, right? You would say. I mean, I think she's pretty similar.
Both of them do, I think.
No.
I think the other one looks more like her.
The actor that no way, no.
Okay,
the actor that plays Rhaenyra, I know that the actor that plays Rhaenyra is non-binary, so but I don't think they look very much like the actress that plays but whatever. But point being, I did not think that that the time jump was seamless. I mean, I don't want to mute this if you haven't seen it yet, but just like
good point. Spoilers.
The whole sequence with Daemon in the Free Cities, I mean, I thought it seemed like it was out of a different show. And then everything that was happening in King's Landing, like, why did they not choose to gradually explore Rhaenyra's courtship with this strong guy? They just jump into it. How do I get emotionally invested in this romance where they clearly have 3 children together if you've jumped us already into it and she had another love interest before? I do like how he's basically a misogynist slut shamer. That is an interesting angle for the Sir Kristen Cole character. But other than that, I just thought I was really into it up to this point, but the time jump kind of took me out of it. And it was a weirdly directed episode too. But that's just my thoughts.
Okay, I think that they went with the angle of the misogynist slut shamer because they want to get more conservatives to watch the show. But then also, yeah, I think maybe they didn't want you to get that invested in the romance because they knew it wasn't gonna last long, maybe. No more spoilers than that, but anyway, at some point we'll talk more about this, I'm sure. Okay, let's jump into a couple of comments.
Sorry, I went too long. I went way too long. We'll talk about it another time.
No worries. Ian says in the member comments, John and Emma, what an awesome birthday present. Well, happy birthday. That's awesome to hear. Jojo H says Vigorola, nice. And Travel Nurse Dragon says Florida, there's a shark in the governor's mansion. Nice, I like it. Okay, we're gonna get to more of your comments, don't worry, but first, more news.
All right. I don't want to hear any more about your Dungeons and Dragons or your Fruity Cocoa Puff.
Welcome back, everyone. No big deal. Emma Vigeland's up. No big deal, everyone. I know you've been asking for it for a long time.
Literally no big deal. Literally.
No,
but it is good to see you, John, because I've been hosting with everyone but you recently.
I know.
Some might say that this was deliberate avoidance by you of me, but that's just rumors that have been flying around that I've been hearing.
There was a narrow miss where we were going to do election coverage together, and I was so desperate to avoid it that I came in and messed with the power in the studio. Anyway, no, I freaked out when I heard it the same way that Crowder freaked out when Sam suddenly appeared. Anyway, with that said, we got more news to get to. Why don't we tee it off with this?
You can give me a yes or no on this. Would that woman who decided to have an abortion, which would be considered an illegal abortion, be charged with murder?
Okay, let's go back to the basic question there. Is that a human being? Is that a little boy or girl? If it is, it deserves equal protection under the law.
So you're saying yes?
Yes, I am.
So that is Doug Mastriano. Of course, he is the Republican nominee for the governor in Pennsylvania right now. During an election, that abortion, incredibly important topic, and he's being asked in previous years about whether it should be considered murder. And it's fairly clear what he thinks right there. At that point, he had already sponsored a bill that would have banned abortion as early 6 weeks. So he was a little bit early on the Republican side for setting that arbitrary, insane 6 week timeline. And he was asked about 10 weeks there, which would already be a massive reduction from what was the status quo like 6 months ago in the US. And yeah, he seems pretty okay with the idea. Now, asked to comment initially on this becoming a topic once again, he declined. But at some point, he did seem to want to backtrack a little bit. Take a look at this.
The matter of life in Pennsylvania is exactly what the Supreme Court said. It's up to the people of Pennsylvania and the people's representatives. This is on the first page of the decision, the Dobbs decision from June. The people decide in Pennsylvania what that looks like. So my views are kind of irrelevant because I cannot rule by fiat or by edict or executive order on the issue of life. It's up to the people of Pennsylvania. So if Pennsylvanians want exceptions, if they want to limit the number of weeks, it's going to have to come to your legislative body and then to my desk.
Now that is a hell of a thing. So he is in this scandal right now because he implied a couple of years ago that he believes that a woman who has an abortion should be considered a murderer in a state that has capital punishment, which is exciting. And his defense is, well, I mean, it's not like I can do it unilaterally. I'm not gonna say if I still support it, but like it's not like I can sign it myself. So if coming out of this conversation, do you think he still supports it or not? If he didn't, he could get his way out of this scandal by just saying that he doesn't. No, it's clear that he still considers it to be murder. And while he's largely right, as governor, he can't just sign a piece of paper and immediately start executing women who have abortions. Do you want to roll the dice on the continued existence of your rights with a guy who has stated in the past that he doesn't believe that they're rights and that millions and millions of women are murderers? Is that what you want? Emma, what do you think? It's good timing for this with the election just a couple months away.
Well, I mean, this is, I think, why maybe my perception of some of the Democrats' Pied Piper strategies deviates from maybe yours, and I know it did from Jank last time I was on this show. And it is because when you have these extremists that are the general election candidates, there is no shortage of skeletons in their closet, and they really do say what they mean when they go into friendly environments. And I know actually this interviewer was fairly combative with Mastriano when you listen to a fuller context of it as well, which is good to hear. But they'll show their ass, basically. They'll make it clear who they are. And so I do think that there is some value in that, particularly when abortion is going to be what is on the ballot here. I don't even know if Republicans fully understood how galvanized Democratic voters would be in a year that is typically not a good one for Democrats when you have a Democratic president and the midterms are coming up 2 years into that presidency, especially when Biden's approval rating is nothing to write home about. So the fact that he has these comments, there is some value there, and the polling seems to bear that out. And some of the other things he said in that interview are just crazy too, right? Like, I consider it a person no matter what country they're from. If they're here, I consider the fetus a person. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans were fear-mongering constantly about anchor babies and migrants coming over just to give birth here so they could stay in this country. as if that was something nefarious in and of itself. But what this really is he wants to be able to control women. And when you say that you're gonna leave it up to the voters or legislative text is gonna come to me, what that means is that you don't see abortion as a fundamental right. Rights do not get chipped away at the edges. Rights do not have caveats. And rape and incest exemptions, it takes a really long time to prove rape, by the way, kind of expires. Abortion, the time for an abortion expires when that's the case. Those are just fig leaves for their extremism because they don't care about solving rapes. They don't care about, honestly, the incest and the babies that come from that. Many Republicans still think that those girls and women should carry those children. They just use that as a way to deflect from their barbarity. So don't even engage with rape and incest exemptions in abortion debates because it's all in bad faith to cover up how brutal they actually are.
Yeah, that is a great point. Of course, Greg Abbott promised that you didn't have to worry about rape because he was going to stop all of the rape and catch all the rapists. And still, it hasn't happened yet. Maybe later tonight. I don't know. Maybe there will be no more rape in Texas. Sources on the ground say still a big problem. Turned out he didn't give a damn about it. Because when he's being questioned for his barbaric view on abortion, he wants to double down and make sure that you know that he's also a barbarian when it comes to the topic of rape as well. Because he doesn't care about women's rights when it comes to abortion, and he really doesn't care about what happens with rape either. Mastriano, we'll see. We'll see in terms of the strategy. In this case, right now, Josh Shapiro is leading by more than 10 points, which that's not nothing. That seems like a pretty good lead. God only knows. I don't know. I keep hearing there's this red wave. Granted, I hear that on Trump's Truth Social account, but I do hear about that, and so I'm a little bit worried. Anyway, it's important that people know what position these absolute monsters have because they're working as hard as they can, many of these candidates, to make sure that you don't find out about it, stripping their prior like happy placement of how pro-life they were that used to be all over their websites. All of a sudden, as soon as they win the primaries, it's gone. It's weird.
Yeah, Blake Masters did that. And just a quick aside, John, I wanted to clarify. There's no real evidence, it seems like, in this Mastriano case that he was Pied Pipered. It's just candidates like him on the Senate and House side.
Sure.
But just to add to what you were saying here about Mastriano, and the fact that Republicans are hiding their true position when it gets to the general election. They did this in the way that they stripped abortion rights in the first place. Republican right-wing extremists understand that their agenda is deeply unpopular with the majority of Americans. These theocrats understand that. So they lie to you up until the exact point when they can strike and take that right away. They did it with the Supreme Court justices that they appointed, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Coney Barrett. Oh, Roe is settled law. Too bad. They decide against it as soon as they have the opportunity when they're in power. And they'll do the same thing once they get in power, whether it's the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania or it's the Senate races or the House races on the federal level as well.
I agree, 100%. Yeah, I would love for us to live in a country where people were excited to tell you about what they actually believe because they have faith that their views are in line with reality. They're talking about actual crises that actually exist and that people actually support them. That's just not what we're seeing, unfortunately. Now, with that, let's turn to someone arguably worse. Let's roll this.
Democrats aren't the only one destroying farmers' ability to put food on the table. We've got wild hogs destroying farmers' fields. So we decided to go hog hunting.
So Marjorie Greene is hardly the only Republican who's filmed the campaign ad of her, I guess, pretending to be an action star or something, / shooting things and killing things. We're gonna get to some other examples, but she's actually running a little promotion. If you'd like to kill some hogs, you could ride around that helicopter with her. Take a look at this.
We've got skyrocketing inflation, high diesel fuel, and Democrats' America Last policies. Democrats aren't the only one destroying farmers' ability to put food on the table. We've got wild hogs destroying farmers' fields. So we decided to go hog hunting. American farmers out. Sign up below and let's go in that helicopter and go hog hunting. Enter
By the way, if anyone knows any of the staffers working in Marjorie Greene's office, I would love to talk to the young Republican who thought they'd be joining up with someone who was going to write legislation, but instead they found their days filled with having to edit in the sound of a hog dying to a campaign ad. That's a fun little twist on your career right there. Anyway, this is the most minor part of this. We're gonna turn to the more important part, but she makes a claim about how much damage Biden is doing to the farmers. I will remind you about a topic that she definitely didn't care about at the time, which was when Donald Trump started a trade war with China with these new tariffs that devastated farmers, so much so that they had to cut massive stimulus checks directly to different farmers. We'll put up a graphic, you'll see the details there. It's a little bit inside baseball, but I have a feeling she wasn't doing a whole bunch of vlogs at that point about how mad she was. More importantly, of course, she transitions there from talking about how Democrats are harming farmers to the hogs are harming farmers, so let's shoot the hogs. And it doesn't take a massive leap of logic. It takes only about as much as you might expect Marjorie Greene to have the capacity for to say that she is linking those two things and then fantasizing about murdering one of those. But she very much doesn't like if you point out what she's doing there, as we'll show you. But first, Emma, what do you think about this?
I mean, yeah, she's not trained in the art of subtlety, that one, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just take a look at some of the pull-ups that she tries to engage in during her CrossFit endeavors. They're not necessarily they don't really scream technique, nor do they scream subtlety as well. Those will never fail to make me laugh. But like, I mean, one, yes, of course, she's clearly making that connection, and that's I believe she came into the House with a bunch of ads shooting things as well.
Yep.
And I forget exactly what that entailed, but what is with Republicans and their obsessions with hogs and killing hogs? If you remember back in the last major mass shooting, and there have been a few, but the one that captured most of the country's attention, Uvalde. Bill Cassidy, Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican, said that people really need AR-15s to gun down feral hogs because they're going to be destroying their crops. Like, I was unaware that the feral hog problem is one of the largest issues facing our country right now, so much so that we need weapons of war on our streets on a regular basis, and for everyone to be holding on to them in order to just maintain a low feral hog population. I was unaware that this is a kitchen table issue, but apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene, Bill Cassidy, other Republicans seem to think this is what we need to be worried about right now.
Well, see, this is where it's important to have diversity of perspective on the panel, because Emma, you might know, is a coastal elite, and she doesn't understand that up until maybe 30 years ago, there was an entire band of the country where humans could only exist in walled compounds surrounded by an ever-moving, stinking mass of feral hogs, because we didn't have the firepower to strike back. Now, yes, napalm helped, artillery helped, but it was the AR-15 that really allowed us to finally push out and begin to farm on our own. It's the dawn of man,
that's
I
good
would
to
say.
know.
Anyway,
I mean, honestly, I think I'm in a liberal media bubble, so I was unaware of that. But I'm glad that the AR-15 was able to democratize the mowing down hog process.
Exactly.
I appreciate that information.
And by the way, the hogs are an actual problem, but no, you don't need to get an M16 to take it out. That's ridiculous. Anyway, HuffPost had an article titled "Marjorie Taylor Greene likens Dems to hogs, once helped shooting them dead," and she didn't like that. She tweeted, she doesn't like their freedom of speech, I guess. She wants to cancel them. So she tweeted, "I demand you change this headline and your lies about me immediately. Your freedom of press is not freedom to lie about me. I never said anything like this and did not call for violence on Democrats." Well, they didn't claim that you directly called for violence on Democrats. They said you likened Democrats to hogs. Now, I don't expect you to know that word right off the bat, but you can look it up. You have access to the internet. I know it because you tweeted. And so just to be clear, I'm gonna read what she actually said. She said, "Democrats aren't the only ones destroying farmers' ability to put food on the table. We've got wild hogs destroying farmers' fields, so we decided to go hog hunting." What does any of that naturally have to do with each other? Nothing. You chose to connect those things. You likened one to the other. That's a choice that you made, and you know that it's a choice that you made. We're not gonna play games with you. This is the same Marjorie Greene, by the way, that back when we blessedly didn't need to know who she was and she existed mainly online as a weird person on Facebook, somebody on a page that she went to posted about wanting to put a bullet in Nancy Pelosi's head, and she gave it the old thumbs up because she thought that was a cool idea. Can HuffPost do headlines about that, Marjorie Greene? Or are you gonna cancel them for that too? Now really fast, again, as I said, she's not the only one who does this. You had Eric Greitens with an ad that even Republicans denounced this one, where he was going around shooting rhinos. Now, of course, maybe they were only against it because in this, he's literally murdering other Republicans. But you had Dr. Oz. I've literally never seen a person look more uncomfortable holding a gun than he does in that left. Like,
on the right side, he looks like he went to Disney World and went to like the old Wild West exhibit and is doing some sort of photo op with his family.
Now, with the rifle, honestly, any other way you could have held that would have looked better. He looks like he's literally never held it before. He's like, could I hold a tray of crudité instead? Something I'm used to, please. But then we have another ad. This was a guy who I think was, in this ad, I think he was shooting like KKK members or something. And then Blake Masters too. Blake Masters there is pretending that he's ready to shoot someone with a gun. Everybody knows he kills people with knives and then cuts off their skin, allegedly. He likes to collect skin, allegedly. I'm not making a specific claim, so you can't sue me, Blake Masters, but this is a guy that allegedly definitely would have skin in his basement. Anyway, none of these people actually care about the guns, but they do know that their prospective voters do, and so they have to pretend to be badasses and action stars and all that.
Although Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she might actually be a true believer in the gun lifestyle. The thing about what she is good at, and good is maybe not the right word, but what she deploys, I should say, is a tried and true trope of the extreme right wing. And Rush Limbaugh had been training his audience to do this for decades, which is see hidden meaning and hide behind plausible deniability. That's exactly what she's engaging in there. She wants you to make the connection of political violence towards Democrats, and she is basically playing dumb when being asked about it in the press, because it's the same reason that Donald Trump plays the where we go all theme at his rallies. They want to get, and he's even bordering on the edge right there. They want to give enough to their base, to the far right people that support them, while still being able to be respectable publicly. And the reason it works is because of all of that far right insane media training that that kind of extremist base has consumed, and white supremacists think this way too, right? You can hear them in how they talk about how they consume Tucker Carlson's program. Like, he can't say what he actually feels on air, so he'll say this. Yeah. They understand that some things that they truly believe can't be said in polite society, so you have to make euphemisms. And so when she does things like that, she knows exactly the connection that she's making, because a right-wing audience has been understanding this for decades, that this is how their politicians and leaders communicate with them. Yeah, like with the likening the Dems to the Hogs, and in one other way. Before we move on, everybody looking at this ad knows that she's pathetic and try hard, and she just desperately wants to be cool, and it's never gonna happen. But I haven't yet been able to figure out exactly which flavor of pathetic it is. And so I want all of your help. If you go to tyt.com/polls, we have a poll. And so I ask, what is Marjorie Greene referencing with her lightning eyes in the hog ad? Is she jealous of Dark Brandon and wants images of her with lightning in her eyes so that she could be as cool as Joe Biden? Is it a reference to QAnon's The Storm? That seems pretty likely. Is it Stormfront from The Boys, whose eyes glow with lightning, that Nazi superhero on Amazon's show? Or is it just stealing Storm from the X-Men, because even black female superheroes can't have anything without her trying to take it? I don't know, but go to tyt.com/polls and you can vote there, and we'll reveal at some point what you all thought. With that said, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we've got some awesome videos that David Schuster got at a Trump rally. We'll show you those to you after this. Ice cream.
Okay, so a couple quick clarifications. I know some people are gonna take away from that last segment that I'm claiming that Blake Masters has a collection of human skin. I wanna be very clear. I am claiming that he allegedly has a collection of many kinds of skin, of which some is human. I think too much, honestly. That's what I'm claiming. Anyway, also, Emma, what's your vote in that poll, by the way? What is she referencing, or do you have a wild card answer?
I guess my guess is that it would be some sort of like I don't know. Probably trying to reappropriate Dark Brandon if I'm trying to guess. But like I also would think it's kind of standard like trying to make you cool editing styles. Like didn't all those crypto people do that too?
Maybe, I don't know. I know that the other Republicans who did their little action movie ads, none of them added special effects on their eyes. That's just so weird to do.
Well, she's a top 5 fundraiser for House Republicans, so she's got the cash on hand, I guess.
Yeah, she got the Lucas studio to do it. But if Brandon has lasers and she has electricity, when I pathetically try to appear cool, what am I gonna have shooting out of my eyes? Let me know, we'll do a poll. Anyway, super fast, Gabby asks in the members' comments, okay, but I need to hear Emma's opinions on the new Star Wars Andor show.
I have not seen it.
That's what my guess would have been.
Yeah, I only watched The Mandalorian of all of those, and that's the only one I really have a ton of interest in. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I will say I'm 2 episodes in, and it's good. That's all I can say right now. Jemba Gino says, why don't we just use the Jewish space lasers to kill the hogs? 100%. You could kill a whole bunch at once. Anyway, okay. Rough Iron Chef says, Emma is based and so smart, and we are all huge fans of Emma. And who is this other guy? I didn't see the end there. Anyway.
You made the cardinal mistake of starting to read without seeing the end. Yep. I do that all the time and get tricked into saying like dirty things on the Majority Report, unfortunately.
Don't put that idea out there. Anyway, Samuel the Kind Dragon says, this is the best main show ever. Take that, Jank. Anyway, okay, let's see. Uralino says, I was just watching Bernie be the lone voice for American democracy on the Senate floor. Depressing, so ready for TYT. No, again, we can always count on him, or almost always. Phantoms Forever has been here for 21 months on YouTube and says, Johnny and the Vig. Thank you. Let's see, Peter Hamby says, her Vigland growing, the Linda Cohn of the left, her star shines brighter. Green ham without eggs continues to hog spotlight. Her farm is on sale. I realized all too late that those are haikus, so I apologize for butchering them right there, but thank you for the poetry. Camp Runamuck, thank you for the super chat. Pitchforks Dragon says, ice cream in the studio. Do you want ants? Because that's how you get ants. Appreciate the reference there. Anyway, how much time do we have? A few seconds? 15 seconds. Okay, one more. Let's see. Pawn's Gambit says, MTG is an actress and podcaster, not a lawmaker. And she's not even a good one of those. 100%. All she wants is a show. Just give her a show on Fox or Fox Nation. Then literally nobody needs to ever see her again. Come on, Fox, make it happen. You got the money. Okay, more news coming up. Don't go anywhere, and I'll be back. Welcome back, everyone, to What Remains. I want to read just one more super chat because Camp Runamuck had a good point saying those 50 immigrants have to be thanking old Ron Boy today for evacuating them out of Florida. That's a good point, but to be clear, they weren't from Florida. Remember, he took them from Texas and sent them over. It's insane. Anyway, we've got some great videos probably to close out this hour. So are you ready, Emma?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump directly into this.
I believe that America is being saved through Donald Trump and the military. We have world leaders involved, and they're taking back their rights. It goes back to the Constitution. It goes back to our freedom. It goes back to God. It's biblical, and I believe that we're on the verge of seeing it happen immediately.
You'll be shocked to find out that QAnon was a very popular topic of conversation at a recent Trump rally. That video there is an excerpt from a number of awesome videos taken by David Schuster, who he's got his videos on Rebel HQ. He goes to these Trump rallies. We're gonna dive more into the QAnon thing. But to start off, we do have an interesting little connection here. We're joined on the show by Emma Vigeland, who used to be the person at TYT that would go to these rallies and talk to these people. Is that a bit of a throwback to see him asking questions and getting answers about the Bible and secret military tribunals and things like that?
I was gonna say, man, David Schuster, he's on my old beat. But I don't necessarily envy him, right? That was a time in my life. I think I was going to one Trump rally a week for one period. Leading up to the election, and yeah, not. I think it was the midterms. That was when I was doing that because there was the pandemic in 2020. Yeah, so that it was a little exhausting. David can go all at it. Go for it.
100%. Well, he did. She had more to say. Here he is asking her, and she starts talking about voter fraud.
We have judges in place all over the country. Some are from the deep state. Some are from President Trump, and in the process of them denying those rights, well, then you go to the next judge, and exposure comes, and it's coming right now.
But exposure hasn't happened yet.
Oh, it's happening. Oh, yes, it is. You have to get off the news. You have to go someplace else and find it.
Can you point to me a single judge that has ruled that the election was stolen or that there was malfeasance that would have overturned the results of any state?
Look at the Supreme Court.
Well, the Supreme Court hasn't accepted any of these cases either.
How do you know that?
Because they have a docket and they list what cases they review and they issue their opinions.
You choose to believe that, you can believe that, but I have alternative news and I find out differently.
I bet she does. Emma, I don't know when the last time it was that we talked about QAnon, but it's more popular than ever before, both in terms of the percentage of Americans that will just openly say that they believe in it, that they believe that the person who is likely Ron Watkins posting things online, having no access to any information, that he actually has he's the key to all the secrets of our government, of all governments perhaps. And more importantly than that, I think more dangerously than that, so much of what makes up QAnon has had the serial number filed off, and it's just what Republicans believe. Like, Matt Walsh is gonna do 12 hours this week on trans butchers and stuff like that. And he's never gonna say the term QAnon, but it's just QAnon, that's all it is. What do you think about this? How do you get through to a woman who can say, look at the Supreme Court, she has no idea what she's talking about. When he turns around and says, there's no indication that they've ruled anything, she's like, no, you just have to do the research. You have to go on Telegram or Rumble or something. What do you think?
Get off the news, get off the news. Man, I mean, the idea that the Supreme Court has some secret ruling panel. Maybe she saw the term shadow docket and was convinced that is that's where they the process by which they're installing Trump. I just am confused as to how QAnon is even continuing now that Joe Biden is president, because I thought the whole purpose of what QAnon was espousing was that there were secret deep state forces who were actually working on behalf of Trump and were never going to let this happen. And yet it has happened. Society has continued to move along, and none of that has come true. So where is Q? Who is Q? Does it really matter? Is Q just the friends we made along the way? That's kind of how it feels to me. And she mentioned something at the start about religion, and this is a copy and pasting of a fundamentalist religious framework onto something that is political, because all she says, what it comes down to there is, I have faith. I have faith that Donald Trump is the legitimate president, and I don't need any actual facts to back up that case. It is what I believe. So I will seek out alternative media sources. I will get off the news and find something that validates my pre-existing faith. And that's not anything that's rational. That's something that is deeply emotional and something that maybe she should parse out in therapy, but it's not anything that resembles facts or reality, obviously.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a totally accurate read. That woman effectively is an answer to the question, how can people for thousands of years keep waiting for Jesus to come back? Well, what if I told you they didn't have to wait and they just found him in Trump or whoever? It's a different person in each era, but it's someone that fulfills that same purpose, who literally has a divine plan that you just have to have faith and loyalty in. And it doesn't matter if the plan makes any sense, because Trump works in mysterious ways. The deep state, as you point out, is secretly keeping him in power, but also he has to fight the deep state. No word yet on if one is deeper than the other, or if they're both deep but like separated, there's some earth between them, I don't know. He secretly is still president to some of them, or he's arranging things so he'll be president again. He needed to not be president for a little bit for some reason that is never explained. And when years went by where he never said anything about QAnon, that was perfectly fine. The reason you had QAnon was so that Trump could communicate to his loyal followers without implicating himself. Now that he's frequently posting QAnon memes, that doesn't bust a hole in that theory. No, now it's that he's directly trying to tell us something. Well, then why doesn't he just take over? Like, none of this makes any sense. I don't know what we're supposed to do with an ever increasing percentage of the American public being so incredulous that they would believe these sorts of things. But anyway, I do want to get to just one more video because David, he got some great stuff. Here's a little compilation of some of what happened there.
The child sex trafficking.
Right now, the child sex trafficking, the truth about that, the truth about 9/11.
We know that Donald Trump was friends with Jeffrey Epstein.
About everybody in the country, in the world was.
Pretty soon we're going to find out who these people are that are drinking the children's blood and turning it into drugs.
It's a satanic ritual, which is why we masked up, stood 6 feet apart. If you start there, you could research and figure it out.
So we stood 6 feet apart not because of COVID, but because of this satanic ritual involving drinking children's blood.
Well, COVID goes back to how they stole the election. It was all premeditated, pre-planned.
All they got to do is ask, who is Q?
You know who Q is. I don't know who Q is. I don't have my computer here to look at the QAnon drops, the Q drops. So can't you just tell me?
Ask President Trump.
Do the work, you'll find out. You'll find out 174.
174, what does that mean?
Gematria, God's language.
There we go. There we go, right? That's what we're saying.
The 174, I'm sure that there are people who make videos about 174 on TikTok that are making $10 million a year. But to a normal person, none of this, what's the 6 feet thing? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, numbers and symbols, they all mean the same thing. God works in mysterious ways. He sends us messages through numbers and letters. And, like when they also, you can see the religious undertones with the concept of child sex trafficking too, right? Where the religious fundamentalism, they like to operate in terms of really good and really evil and demonic and heavenly. And there's nothing more demonic and dark than a child molester or sex trafficker. And so that's the only way that they are able to see the world. And so, I mean, hey, if Jesus was combating all evil and providing for the good for the rest of people, then so Trump is combating the most evil, and that's the child sex traffickers.
100%. And I guess to combat them, he had to spend time with them, party with them. But it's okay because everybody was friends with Epstein. I mean, maybe I'm only speaking for myself. I wasn't. Well, if I was David, I would have been like, wait, did you know Epstein? Because everybody apparently does. God. Anyway, with that said, we're gonna turn to just quickly one more topic. Let's jump whenever we're ready into this.
There was very targeted comments. There were direct messages, emails, phone calls to my friends looking for me. I received mail at the house. I got sent pictures of dead kids because I was told that as a crisis actor, I didn't really know what a dead kid looked like. So this is what it should look like.
That is Nicole Hockley, whose son Dylan was just 6 years old when he was murdered at Sandy Hook, which is an unimaginable thing to go through. And it doesn't seem like anything could be worse, and yet there are people in this world who found a way to make it worse because they harassed her for years and years and years because an insane person on the internet wanted something to rage about and make a bunch of money selling stay hard pills or whatever. And so Alex Jones's trial continues, and parents like Nicole have to recount the absolutely horrendous experiences that they've had at the hands of his mob of lunatics. Even this trial, by the way, let's not forget, is a traumatic thing for her to have to go through. Her entire life, every day since Sandy Hook, has had to be about the worst thing that ever happened to her, because the most evil, deranged people in the world will not allow her a moment to maybe get some sort of peace, some sort of distance or clarity on this horrible experience. And so I can't imagine what it's like to have to talk about this, but I am glad that there are people like Nicole, as well as a number of other parents who lost their kids tragically at Sandy Hook, that are continuing to testify and make it unavoidable for everyone to acknowledge how horrendous it was, what Alex Jones did to these people. Emma, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a bit about this in the context of the QAnon folks, and how there's like this religious framework by which they view Donald Trump, and they view the world by extension of him. And there is another piece to that. There's a narcissism too involved in that, which is what conspiracy theories that are not, about actually challenging the powerful say. If you're looking into, who actually killed Malcolm X or MLK or JFK, right? Those have value. What this doesn't have any value. All it does is demonize regular people to feed a narcissism with alienated people, probably consuming Alex Jones's content, who want to feel like they have access to a certain kind of special knowledge that they get to investigate and that they get to look into. Hey, the mainstream media who's saying that this horrible, brutal, just unconscionable, unimaginable thing happened to these parents, they're lying to you. I have something entirely contrasting that I can provide for you, and you can consume this media because it's very different than what your friends or what your parents or what everybody else is engaging in, and you're special. You have access to the secret knowledge, and hey, now everyone's lying to you. Aren't you angry about that? Aren't you gonna start harassing these parents who have gone through the most heart-wrenching, just like I can't even think about the pain that they endured and continue to endure to this day? Time to harass them. They're lying to you. They're the real problem. And that is what is so insidious about just what Alex Jones does regularly, and the fallout from this particular act of malfeasance on his part.
Exactly. Yeah, and to do it because you are insane enough to believe it is bad enough, but to do it because you want to make more millions of dollars is just insane. You're a multi-millionaire willing to put people through unimaginable suffering so you can have more irrelevant money that has no impact on your quality of life. Can you think of anything more evil than that? And he's not the only person. It's not the only grifty conspiracy theory for profit that has left a trail of victims in its wake. But this one broke through, I think, because it is so reprehensible, and the campaign against these parents lasted so long. They're still getting harassment to this day, in no small part because of the trial, that thankfully it's getting people to acknowledge this massive problem we have in our culture. Now, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for our show. Emma, it is indeed a rare treat to have you on the show. Hopefully, we won't have to wait another year and a half to talk politics again, but thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, and I wish I could come on Damage Report more, but it's just a bit difficult. My show runs at the same time, but hopefully we can do this again soon.
Well, really fast, your show is, where can people watch you?
Oh, the Majority Report with Sam Cedar every day live at noon to around 2:30, sometimes till 3 if Sam gets a call from a libertarian that he wants to debate for like over an hour and a half, keeping us here longer. Honestly, that happens way more than you would think. Yeah. But check us out there. The show, I mean, I'm really proud to work there. It's a great leftist show, much like TYT. And Sam's a legend, and he never backs down from literally anybody, which makes it fun to work with him.
Awesome, yes. Good people over there. Everyone should definitely tune in to see Emma. And then as soon as the Damage Report goes live, switch over to that. Anyway, Emma, great to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And with that said, we got another hour coming. Jessica Burbank and Wosny Lambre are gonna be in studio. It's gonna be a lot of fun. You're not gonna wanna miss it. So we'll see you in a few.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries, because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country, so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Ice cream.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Young Turks. It's Jessica Burbank here, and I'm joined with Waz. Waz Lombres here. Can you imagine that?
Yes, sir. My first time in studio. Can't believe it. No Anna, no Jack. It's us.
Bart's always ready with the sound effects. Yeah, it's us. I'm honored to be the person you're in the studio first with.
Absolutely.
We have a really good show.
Same. Last week was so fun. We decided to run it back.
Yeah, that's
or
exactly
at least the producers did.
Yeah. Got us back together again. I was sad that we wouldn't get to work together, and then here we are, just a few days later.
Just like that.
All right, you ready to get into some stuff?
Of course. Let's do it.
Let's get into this. So some of you are going to die, and that is a risk that Jerome Powell is willing to take. I'm not exaggerating. The Federal Reserve's policy is violent against working class people. They've decided again last week, just last Wednesday, so precisely 1 week ago, to raise interest rates again. Let's hear from Jerome Powell.
Without price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. Today, the FOMC raised its policy interest rate by 0.75 percentage point, and we anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate.
So that might sound pretty dry, right? Raising interest rates sounds like a very dry policy, and they would like for us to think that as well, so we don't pay too much attention to it. So we're gonna break it down for you today. So precisely how does raising interest rates put more people out of a job? The working theory is that if they make it more expensive for banks to obtain money, banks will then make it more expensive for businesses to borrow money, to take out loans, to invest in existing businesses and start new ones. This means that there will be less jobs because there are less businesses and less business growth. So their whole theory here is to make people more unemployed, to raise the unemployment rate. And Jerome Powell says this directly. Let's watch that.
If it does turn out that we are in a world of a persistent labor shortage over time, that'll be a challenging world for companies, and it will certainly create upward pressure on wages. Wages are running at elevated levels, and so we think by our policy interventions, what we hope to achieve is a period of growth below trend, which will cause the labor market to get back into better balance, and that will bring wages back down to levels that are more consistent with 2% inflation over time.
So more people being out of a job means there's more competition in the labor market. People will be very desperate for work, therefore willing to take jobs at lower wages. They're using words here that most people don't understand because they really don't want people to understand how cruel these policies really are. And the reason he's not making the connection as to why this will bring inflation down, which is the story they're telling. I'm sorry, we've got to raise these interest rates, more people will be unemployed, but the end goal is good for everyone, inflation will go back down. The reason they're not making the connection there is because this policy will not actually bring prices back down for people. The inflation that we're experiencing started at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was greatly driven by supply chain issues. When we saw people switch their spending from services and more towards goods because they were staying at home, we saw increased pressure on that part of the economy, that sector. We saw prices go up. There were supply chain breakdowns. People who drive the trucks to get the goods from A to B were sick and they couldn't drive them. We had semiconductor shortages. And then corporations capitalized on this idea that there were supply chain issues and we had widespread inflation. They used it as an excuse to raise prices far more than necessary. Corporations saw 25% growth in their profits. Let's break down some of those numbers. So these are grocery stores. Albertsons' net income, in other words, profit, has jumped 192% since 2019. And before the pandemic, so that was since 2019, so before the pandemic, and then sales, to give you that figure, came in at 54.5 billion for the first 9 months of 2021. Publix posted sales of 35.4 billion through the first 9 months of 2021. That's up 25% from 28.4 billion in sales for the same time period before the pandemic in 2019. Kroger reported 104.8 billion in sales for the first 3 quarters for 2021. Sales growth is up 12.2% from pre-pandemic levels. To put this into context, if you were struggling because there were supply chain issues and you raise your prices to account for the additional costs you're accruing there, you wouldn't be seeing record profits. You would have raised prices just enough to cover that cost, but they are seeing record profits. Let's also look at how much they are now spending in wages. This graph is really shocking, and it might be disorienting at first, but I'll break it down. So the top two bars, you're seeing a comparison. The top bar is 2020 to 2021. And the lighter color bar, so the light blue bar, is 1979 to 2019 average. So we're seeing corporate profits increase dramatically. And I want to bring your attention to the last two bars at the bottom. The amount that these corporations are spending on labor compared to 1979 to 2019 is abysmal. They are not raising wages in accordance with inflation. So what's their end game here? Are they going to continue to raise prices so much so that their workers cannot afford it given their wages are so low? Who will be left to buy the products? Let's also look at this next graph. This is workers' share of corporate income. So the proportion that goes to workers of the profit made in a business. You can see how much things have changed from 1979 to today. It's on a steady decline. So when Powell says we've got to quell the heat in the labor market and wages are growing at far too fast of a pace, when inflation adjusted, we haven't seen wage growth since the 70s, he is lying. We're not experiencing workers having outsized power and seeing huge gains when it comes to their wages. What's happening right now is the people in power are not fighting for us. Let's watch this.
We are accountable to the public through Congress. That's a very fundamental, important aspect of our work. But we do not, we focus solely on the goals that Congress has given us, and that's what we're going to do here.
All right, so what's Congress up to? Well, it turns out they actually know that the current Federal Reserve policy of increasing interest rates and making more people unemployed will not work, and they know because Jerome Powell told them himself. Watch.
Chair Powell, will gas prices go down as a result of your interest rate increase?
I would not think so, no.
That matters because gas prices are one of the single biggest drivers of inflation. Energy prices overall drove a third of the inflation last month, but the Fed's tools, as you say, have no impact here. Price of groceries is up nearly 12% this year. Americans feel the pinch. No matter how much groceries cost, people still gotta eat. Chair Powell, will the Fed's interest rate increases bring food prices down for families?
No, I wouldn't say so, no.
And yet they're raising rates, and they plan to continue to raise rates. If you really want to know why the people in power are pursuing a policy, you just need to look at the effects of that policy. And the effect here is to quash worker power. They want to squash the labor movement because they see 71% of support for unions. They see people actually in the streets fighting for their rights, and they are scared. Why? Because these people are shareholders in these corporations. Corporations lobby members of Congress. Members of Congress hold stock in these corporations. They don't want worker power. They don't want wages to go up and cut into those profits, which line their pockets on our backs. Waz, I want to bring you in here. What are your thoughts on this?
These guys are old, and I don't mean that in like an ageist type of way, but the last time that the country dealt with an inflation crisis was back in the 70s, where this guy would have been going to his graduate schools and cutting his teeth in how he understood economics. And this was sort of the conventional wisdom, right? Like you raise the interest rate and then this will even everything out, right? That was not that was even right, but that was the prevailing rule of thumb back then. And so like these guys all feel like this is what they have to do. And the second thing that strikes me is that inflation is a lot of times is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we tell everybody there's inflation, they want to hoard goods in order to get them at the lowest price possible. That's on one end. And then on the other end, corporations are like, oh, people think there's inflation happening, so we should raise the prices on our goods to, maximize our profits. Not that we're actually paying more for stuff, not that we're actually losing revenue. It's just that if everybody's saying it and everybody thinks it, then we get to behave as if it's true. And that's what I think we're seeing here.
That is exactly what we're seeing here. I'm just gonna share a quote that broke today that really demonstrates precisely what Waz just said. The CEOs were praying for inflation. So this is really good reporting from The Intercept. At a September 20th investor event at Iron Mountain Inc., CEO Will Meany, I can't believe his last name is Meany, explained that where we've had inflation running at fairly rapid rates, we're able to price ahead of inflation. That is, increase its prices at a greater rate than the high recent rates of inflation. As Meany put it, raising prices obviously covers our increased costs, but a lot of that flows down to the bottom line. He also noted that this didn't just apply to his company. People are seeing what FedEx, UPS, and others are having to do to actually manage their business and pass on that inflation. For that reason, Meany had long been doing my inflation dance, praying for inflation. They're saying the quiet part out loud all the time, and we're making sure you all hear it. All right, we've got to go to a break. We'll have more after this.
Ice cream.
Here with some member comments. We've got Text Stan here. Waz and the bank in the studio, 100% chance of fun. That's a good prediction.
I love to hear that.
Rage Against the Machine. Is that really you guys? Says capitalism is going to break and it's going to break soon. You rich a-hole. I don't know if I can say that. Wages are inflated. Get the bleep out of here, asshole. I think I can because I think they bleeped the bad ones. Bleep you, $7.25 an hour is bullshit. I agree, it is insane, and it's going to break because they're getting so greedy. I think about like how I got to college. It was bankers that were super greedy, right? A working class kid going to school. Oh, well, we could have her take out loans so that she's indebted to us for life and we make money off of it. But now, I'm talking into a camera talking about how the Federal Reserve policies are hurting working people. So they kind of played themselves with that one. Capitalism will end itself. We've got Mr. Lumberg, AKA Initech Dragon, saying wages running at elevated levels? What? People doing better financially is a bad thing somehow? That's a really good point. Because framing this as like a demand-driven problem, right? Too many dollars or chasing too few goods is ridiculous because if we needed to increase supply, more people would need to go to work, right? So we should not be decreasing unemployment levels, we should be increasing employment levels. Their own logic works against them. We've got Tuffy Dragon Trainer. Jessica has amazing hair and an awesome reporting and hosting style. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now then Zen says, if we had a free market economy, price inflation would lag behind commodity and wage inflation as businesses try to gain and keep market share. Price inflation front runs those things, proving we have a managed rent-seeking economy. It's very true, right? We've got an economy where the top 10% own 70% of the wealth. They control all of our labor, all of our land, all of our resources, and make decisions for all of us, what we do every day when we go to work, what happens with the land and the country that we live on. This is not democratic, but for some reason, we don't think, oh, we should apply those democratic principles to our economic system as well. And it's time we start rethinking this because we all have to wake up and go to work every day and participate in the economy. So maybe we should have a say in how things run. Crazy idea, crazy idea. I think this is from earlier, but we've got Boomer Dragon Cat saying, I've got a Haagen-Dazs ice cream bar for today. Ate both the strawberry shortcake and creamsicle bars last week. One for Anna, one for John, both for me. I don't get that reference, but I know that there's something with ice cream and Wednesdays from before when I was here. So I'm an ice cream lover, so love that comment. More for you on the other side. We're back. It's Waz in the bank. All right, we've got more news for you. Let's get into this. So the battle of David and Goliath continues. It's actually turning into more of a war. We know the battle was won at JFK 8 in Staten Island, and now Goliath is seeking extra legal measures. At ALB1, which is an Amazon warehouse just outside of Albany, New York, they're about to hold an election, and predictably, Amazon is sending the goons to union bust, as usual. One worker took a picture of ALB1's anti-union headquarters and discovered just how good these union busters are living. They caught a photo of a whiteboard where they had been writing some interesting things. Let's get into that. Here's a picture tweeted by Seth Goldstein, who's a lawyer for the Amazon Labor Union. He said, an inside look at Amazon's ALB1 union busting headquarters. This is where anti-union consultants, who each get paid thousands of dollars daily by Amazon, strategize about how to kill the Amazon labor movement. These consultants dress like workers in an attempt to not stand out, and you can see them there in their neon vests. And if you zoom in close enough, you can actually read the words on the whiteboard. So recommendations on their list for dining options while they're in town include casual restaurants like Ted's Fish Fry, but also more expensive options like Delmonico's for steak, according to the whiteboard, or 677 Prime, which according to its website is upstate New York's premier steakhouse and offers a $179 A5 Japanese Wagyu filet, $40 per ounce snow-aged Japanese Wagyu, and caviar for $165 on its menu. And Seth, the lawyer for the Amazon Labor Union, summed this up pretty well on Twitter. He said, they're trying to look like the workers, but they're not like the workers. They make $3,200 a day. They're worried about steak and all the good places to eat, and our members can't afford it. They don't have a living wage. What's written on the whiteboard gets really cringe. They wrote a bunch of hashtags under a cartoon bee drawing. I'm not sure what is going on here. Hashtag be kind, hashtag positive vibes, hashtag be thankful, and hashtag Bayhive? Beyonce, if you're watching, please denounce union busting publicly, because I don't think these are your people. ALB1 will have its union election on October 12th. In the months leading up to the election, Amazon has been playing pretty dirty with its staffers. On the same day that they filed and triggered the union election, the lead organizer was given a written complaint, a warning for taking photos of safety violations. Let's watch this.
You can't write me up for something you haven't done a full investigation on.
Like I said, I did not conduct the investigation.
Then who did? You guys can't come to me with disciplinary action if you haven't conducted a full investigation.
The investigation is complete.
So is this a written warning?
So this is a final written.
Wait, this isn't a final written warning because I didn't even get a verbal warning.
Amazon has sent its loss prevention employees now to the bus stop where Chris Smalls was organizing for the upcoming election. Let's watch that.
It's up to your attorney. Why they got y'all doing jobs?
So go inside and get a copy of the letter. Would you like a copy?
Okay, so just to confirm, you're refusing to leave the property?
Just to confirm, you're defying a letter from the attorney, and you are not respecting his right to be here.
He makes a good point there. What is your job, man? You work for loss prevention and you're out here trying to kick me off of the bus stop because I'm organizing a union? Absolutely insane. Amazon has also gone so far as to call the police on the organizers at that bus stop. Let's watch.
So we got a call from Amazon. You guys are kind of contesting this bus area thing here. All right, so just a little bit of history on that. I've been here since this was a cornfield for 40 years. So when Amazon built this facility, they built this shelter, okay? It doesn't say CDT on it. It's not a public access shelter, okay? So they basically built it at their own expense. New York State penal law states that if you knowingly remain on a premise unlawfully, then you can be charged with a violation. It's called trespass. It's not the end of the world. You know what our job is? Like if you call us, it's a legitimate complaint as far as we're concerned. We don't want to arrest anybody. But if we will if we have to. That's our job.
I mean, this is gonna look bad for both of y'all, but I'm just saying.
Well,
he's right. It will look bad for both Amazon and the police because they're protected under Section 7. They're allowed to be at the bus stop by the Amazon warehouse that Amazon apparently paid to have constructed, but it is a public bus stop. I spoke with Seth Goldstein on the phone earlier today, the lawyer with the Amazon Labor Union, and they've got 3 cases ongoing for 3 complaints with the NLRB right now, and the board found merit in these cases. Nevertheless, the election is still happening on the 12th, but one of the remedies is for a national order against Amazon so that workers will be notified about what happened and how it's wrong. And a really interesting remedy, and the board has never gone for such a sweeping remedy, is to order management training for union rights at every Amazon facility in the country. And so it's interesting. They have done things like this before. They've done anti-harassment trainings as remedies over Zoom. So surely they can order a union rights training because what Amazon is doing deserves a remedy in equal proportion. All of those workers should receive a union rights training. So those are my thoughts on that. Waz, I would love to know yours.
Yeah, I think it's the same old story, honestly. Every time a union drive pops up with any one of these major corporations, they spring into action and try to squash it. I kind of chuckle because that restaurant got to step it up. I mean, $3,200 a night. I think they could afford the A5 Wagyu, probably ribeye. Some of us like a little bit more fat content on our Wagyu. No, but seriously, it's always fun to watch management sort of step on a rake there, right? Like we're talking about people who are fighting for basic rights, like a little bit of higher wages, better working conditions, vacation pay, sick pay, the most basic of workers' rights. And the consultants come in, the people who are getting, the people that Amazon can afford to pay $3,000 a day to try to union bust are going out and having steak dinners when they're not union busting. It's just the type of faux pas that I think will, sow even more dissent amongst the working people in Amazon. So it's nice to see that they, these fools don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're getting out organized by the ALU. People that initially they were spreading emails about, talking smack about, and now those people are leading this movement that's really successful. Yep. I mean, they've got another union election going on in Albany. They're working on unionizing warehouses across the country. They're having national calls. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos has not answered for the $127 billion that went unreported to the IRS. He's paying a 1.1% tax rate when on average Americans pay 25% on their income. And it's just disgusting that they're willing to spend this amount of money to squash this union movement and pay people, like Waz said, $3,200 per day. If you are questioning whether or not it's worthwhile for workers to join a union, there's a reason they are spending this much money to stop the union effort. Because their profits are at stake here. They don't want to pay workers fair wages. They want to keep those margins high, and they're willing to do anything to prevent workers from getting a union. If there's one thing that demonstrates how powerful unions are, look at how vehemently Amazon is fighting against them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also ideological. It's not that this would make such a dent in Amazon's profits. It's just the idea that the powers that be see this as antithetical to everything that they're about. They're not gonna be pushed around by people that they see as beneath them. And so they're gonna fight this tooth and nail. This wouldn't be some massive profit hit to one of the richest companies literally that's ever existed, right? They're just like, no, we're not gonna take crap from a bunch of people who are below us in our station. And I think that's what most of this fight is about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. They can absolutely afford to pay these people well above a living wage. They're making
Have you seen that guy's
money.
boat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. They're afraid of worker power. It is political. They want to keep class divisions as they are in the United States. And they're definitely threatened by people like Chris Smalls, like Derek, and like the leaders of the Amazon labor movement, Gerald and Jordan, because these guys are going around the country all summer talking about a general strike and what would happen if workers across the country realize their power when they come together, because they see that things that are going on in our country are not working for everyday people. They see our rights being stripped away. And if workers come together and withhold their labor and they're organized, guess what? Now they're hitting the people where it really hurts, in their pockets, and that's how they realize their power.
And by the way, this is the only thing these people respond to. They're not gonna, out of the goodness of their heart, say, oh, we're making record profits. Why don't we just make it rain and let the profits, sort of drizzle down on our little workers? No, they're not gonna do that out of the goodness of their heart. They only respond to power in kind. And so this is the only way to do this. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to this next story. We've got more folks withholding their labor in an interesting setting. So inmates in Alabama are on their third day of strike today. I spoke with the organizers on the ground earlier today, and their message is pretty straightforward. They said incarcerated citizens in the Alabama Department of Corrections are in crisis. In 2019, a lawsuit filed by the DOJ found the prisons to be overcrowded, understaffed, inhumane, and extremely violent, labeling them as the deadliest in the United States. Since the lawsuit, the findings have gotten significantly worse, yet the DOJ is allowing them to buy more time to come up with a, quote, Alabama solution. Building new mega prisons will not solve this crisis. The DOJ has failed to hold the ADOC and Governor Ivey accountable. As more lives are being lost and many more at stake, we are gathering with demands that will resolve the issues that are plaguing the system that doesn't call for building new prisons. The strike comes after this photo of Casilio Vaughn at Alabama's Elmore Correctional Facility went viral. Now we've got attorney Ben Crump on the case, who said this is horrific. Let's be clear, the state of Alabama has tried to deflect any action or responsibility for Mr. Vaughn's condition at every turn. The prison system issued a statement Tuesday saying that Vaughn had surgery for an obstructed bowel in August and was hospitalized in September for a complication. So I think it's really important. We also hear from the prisoners who are withholding their labor inside of the prison. They said, how long can 25 people run a prison with 1,000, 1,800, 2,300, etc. prisoners? If they withhold their labor, the prison won't run itself. So we've got a message from the people inside the prison in Alabama. They released this and we got it directly from the organizers there on the ground. They said, we, the incarcerated citizens in ADOC, demand that the US Justice Department intervene and put an immediate stop to Alabama's systematic denial of our human dignity and rights. The state of Alabama is in the midst of a humanitarian crisis due to 8th Amendment violations. The crisis has occurred as a result of antiquated sentencing laws that led to overcrowding, numerous deaths, severe physical injury, as well as mental anguish to incarcerated individuals. This humanitarian crisis led to the Department of Justice filing suit against Kay Ivey and ADOC, yet nothing has changed or gotten better, only worse. Therefore, for the sake of our lives, we are exercising our First Amendment right to peacefully protest this unconstitutional, unsafe, and hyper-exploitative system. We need help and we need it now. As one unit, we band together and state the following. Repeal the habitual offender law immediately, make the presumptive sentencing standards retroactive immediately, repeal the drive-by shooting statute, create statewide conviction integrity unit, mandatory parole criteria that will guarantee parole to all eligible persons who meet the criteria, streamlined review process for medical furloughs and review of elderly incarcerated individuals for immediate release, reduction of the 30-year minimum for juvenile offenders to no more than 15 years before they are eligible for parole, and do away with life without parole. There's also a message that was shared specifically from the inmates who are on death row in Alabama in prison. They said, we, the men of Alabama's death row, band together and state that the Alabama's capital murder statute and execution method are unconstitutional, inhumane, and violate our human rights. Therefore, we join ranks with all incarcerated individuals in protest against the state of Alabama, and they shared their demands as well. So what's going on here is pretty shocking. I'm honestly surprised it took this long, because what's going on in our prisons are disgusting. And I know I don't speak for everyone when I say this, but I do know that violence begins and ends with the state when it comes to prisons. And I'm not really afraid to say unpopular things when it comes to prisons, because I think throughout our history, there have been so many things that people have fought for that were so unpopular at the time. Think about slavery, think about the civil rights movement and how unpopular Dr. King was back then when he did the March on Washington. He was not a popular individual. And if we're actually interested in living in a just society, we've got to say things that are presently unpopular so that we actually have progress. And so the fact that these inmates don't have medical care, are not being given 3 meals a day, or are being forced to work against their will, this is not an accident. The reason prisoners are committing suicide in the prison are because the conditions are that bad. And when we have a society that's governed by a system where the means of production are controlled by private owners for profit, that's the society we live in, where 10% of people have 70% of the wealth, they're not gonna run the prison system in a just way, and they haven't since the very beginning. Let's not forget that the 13th Amendment of the Constitution states that slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. And that's what happens in the United States every single day. We see that people are intentionally made unemployed. They have limited options. They join the illicit economy just to put food on the table and feed their families. And then those actions are criminalized by the state. And they're put in places like ADOC. It is disgusting. And so I think all prisoners should go on strike in the United States because this system is inhumane.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of, this would have been about 10 years ago. A homie of mine from my neighborhood, he had gotten back from prison, and he was actually working at my dentist's office, and he was like, yeah, this is actually not that much dissimilar from what the work that he was doing in prison. I was like, really, you had a job? He said, yeah, I was making eyeglasses in prison. I was like, did they pay you like a job? He's like, yeah, like $1.50 an hour, literally. And he was like, yeah, you use that money to go towards some of your basic goods that you would use in the prison. And I remember being shocked by that. And so when I read about these prisoners in Alabama and the strike that they were going on, it was pretty harrowing stuff, because if Amazon workers are people who are sort of at the bottom rung of society, people who are incarcerated are at the bottom of the bottom, right? There are like normal people would, feel inclined to be like, well, we want to see nice things happen to Amazon workers. For people who have committed felonies, they don't have as many advocates on the outside, and so these people are literally voiceless. But I think, if we're gonna pretend that we're some special country, special society, how we treat these people is a reflection of our values, right? And the difference between the United States and some whatever other type of country is that even though these people committed crimes, we should be treating them humanely and like human beings. And so, I think it's really heartening to see these people speaking up for themselves, because trust me, nobody else will.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we will. We are right now. We're doing our best at that.
We are.
But yeah, think about like the economic conditions that were created by the state and by people in power that led to many of these people committing crimes. And I know I talked about crimes of economic necessity, right? Stealing to feed your family. We see the NYPD posting up that they've obtained things that were stolen, and it's baby formula. But also think about who becomes a serial killer. These are people who are traumatized, who are terribly mentally ill. Who were their parents? Oh, their parents were people that the United States government sent abroad to fight proxy wars. They came back with PTSD and they raised their kids. Did they do a good job raising their kids? Probably as good as they could when they were traumatized as they are. And we know that there's ample evidence pointing to even the people who are the most violent in our society are just terribly sick. They have mental illnesses that stem from early childhood trauma. And so you can trace back a lot of the violence to the state. Any last thoughts on this, Waz?
Man, I just would really like to see some changes in the system, the prison system specifically. It's just like, we can't throw these people away. Like that's my final thought. Like I understand if somebody killed 3 people, yeah, they got to pay their restitution to society, and they probably should be in prison for it. I don't have a problem with that, but we don't have to torture them and treat them inhumanely in the process. And I know that's like a weird hill to want to die on, right? Some people would think these are the scum, the gum on the bottom of your shoe type of people, a society. But again, I think it's a reflection on us how we treat those people who are, basically on the outskirts.
That's so true. All right, we've got to take another break. We'll be back after this.
Ice cream.
All right, we've got Cam Miller, the gender fluid dragon, says, oh dang, the bank said general strike, hell yes. It's not the first time general strike has been said in this studio, but I agree, hell yes. We've got Urban Hermit saying Amazon needs strong contractual language on job loss through automation, robots, and auto unions dealt with this decades ago. That's very interesting, yeah, thank you. Jonathan said if they really wanted to do something about inflation, they should nationalize oil to lower the gas prices. Also, they should tax back these windfall profits that the fat cats got during the pandemic and put that money towards free childcare and fixing some of the supply chain issues. They won't do any of this though. Yeah, you raise a really good point. In other countries, it's like openly debated. Does any one person deserve to own the oil that's under the ground? What can one human being do to be the guy that's in control of the oil? Of course it should belong to the people who live on that land.
They found it.
Yeah,
they discovered
it. Oh, they came in with their guns and they were like, this is ours now. I forgot.
Such a genius move to find the sludge.
Yeah, oh, you're the sludge finding guy. And now those people run our society. This is a system we have. The people who find the sludge get to make all the decisions. All right, Sexy Speed Racer says, it is so nice to have a media outlet in TYT that isn't doing nonstop continuous coverage of Ian today. It's getting as bad as what they did in the aftermath of the Queen of England's death. I'm not gonna lie, when you commented this, we were all like, who's Ian? It's the hurricane. And when natural disasters happen, of course, we know that climate change and the increased disasters related to climate change increasing in their acuity, it's a huge problem. It's gonna disproportionately impact working people and communities of color.
Jess, I'd just like to say, even though I had no idea what that person was talking about, to my people in South Florida, I'm thinking about you guys. I promise our thoughts are with you. We just forgot the guy's name on the hurricane.
Yeah, when I'm sure they're not gonna do a great job handling this, and we'll cover it then, right? And we'll speak truth to power on your behalf at that point. But we're not weather people, I'm sorry. Yeah, someone says, Anne Marie said, my family is currently without power in the eye of the hurricane. Our heart goes out to your family, Anne Marie. I hope they end up being okay, and anyone else feeling the impacts of Ian. All right, we've got more on the other side. We'll see you over there. back on the Young Turks. It's Jessica Burbank and Wazlam Bray. We got through some serious news so far, and we're gonna make things fun now. I promise. We're gonna lighten it up. This next story is an interesting one. Let's watch this.
Then they pill it up in plastic and then they distribute it. It's very hard to detect.
You know, Dana, I mean, young children now going out to trick or treat. I mean, basically parents have a decision to make. You don't let your kids get that candy. It doesn't mean the person giving it out is intending to harm.
You throw away all the nerds and the sweet tarts.
All right, so that's Jesse Waters. The Five was using the good old drugs in your kids' candy scare tactic, I don't know, to drum up their viewers' anger. Before we dive further into this hysteria, we really wanna make it clear that fentanyl in the United States is a very big issue. However, the fear of fentanyl in candy, might not be as big of an issue as they're leading us on to believe. So the latest data suggests that the annual drug overdose deaths have jumped 44% from before the COVID-19 pandemic. There were about 76,000 deaths reported in the 12-month period ending in March 2020. The CDC's latest provisional data show that more than 109,000 people in the United States died of a drug overdose in the 12-month period ending March 2022. Synthetic opioids, including fentanyl, were involved in more than 2/3 of overdose deaths in the year ending March 2022. Deaths involving synthetic opioids increased by a staggering 80% over the past 2 years, CDC data shows. Fentanyl is now the #1 cause of death for Americans aged between 18 and 45. That being said, conservative media really isn't taking this issue seriously, and instead they're focusing on fentanyl Halloween candy. I don't know, because maybe that drives more views. I don't understand their intentions, but specifically the hosts are fretting about rainbow fentanyl, which just refers to brightly colored fentanyl or pills. So the US Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, released a warning in August advising the public of this alarming emerging trend of colorful fentanyl available across the United States. Since then, some colleges and universities are cautioning students about the presence and dangers of rainbow fentanyl, and the California Department of Public Health has alerted K-12 school administrators in the state about rainbow fentanyl being a new trend. But are young people really flocking to rainbow fentanyl because of the colors? CNN spoke to a doctor, Dr. Sam Wang, who's a pediatric toxicologist at a children's hospital in Aurora, Colorado. Here's what the doctor said. While Wang and his colleagues are aware of rainbow fentanyl warnings, he hasn't heard any patients or parents mention it. So it doesn't seem like a very big issue. Mariah Francis, who's a resource associate with the National Harm Reduction Coalition, spoke pretty bluntly when Rolling Stone asked her about fentanyl, saying, "The idea that because the pills are colorful means that the cartels must be trying to force fentanyl or ply children or their Halloween candy is markedly ridiculous. People just make creative colors, and honestly, there's no reason for it. It's been happening for the last 60 years. We saw it with MDMA. We see it on club drugs, and it's actually kind of embarrassing because the DEA is just really, really late to the party." I don't think there was a pun intended there. Francis adds that the idea that cartels want children to mistake their pills for candy is utterly divorced from reality, and instead points to the very nature of fentanyl production as driven by profits, something that doesn't mesh with children who usually lack disposable income. Yeah, the cartels aren't like, you know what, buy this and give it away for free. It's not a great business model. The DEA has stated that it found 15,000 rainbow fentanyl pills packaged in Nerds and Skittles boxes in Connecticut. But take the DEA's word for what you will, the rainbow fentanyl Halloween crisis, it's more than likely just Fox digging up an old story and trying to sensationalize it again. I wouldn't be too concerned about this if I was a parent. Fentanyl, of course, is a major problem, but not so much for Halloween candy. Here's a statement directly from the DEA. With Halloween right around the corner, law enforcement officials are urging parents to check their children's candy. The DEA Orlando District Office has issued a warning to the public about products that look identical to common snack foods and candy, but actually contain high levels of THC, the principal psychoactive ingredient in cannabis. Yes, people are giving away their edibles for free to children. Thank you, Orlando. Definitely the people at the DEA office in Orlando watch Fox News. I'm pretty confident in that. Waz, what are your thoughts on this?
I just want to say to the listeners out there, the last part of what that lady said in her statement is the most important part. Drug dealers sell drugs to make money. Maybe some of you guys in the audience have never known any drug dealers. I happen to have. In my past, I've known people who sold drugs. They all did it to make money, to buy sneakers, get cars, therefore get girls, be popular. That's why they did it. They didn't do it to get kids high. That's just for free. That's just not one of the things. And then if somebody in your neighborhood happens to be someone who sells drugs, and you might think to yourself, oh, they wanted to participate in trick or treat this year and they somehow messed up their packages. No, I don't think a drug dealer would want to give away his mode of income and then kill a bunch of children, thereby attracting the attention of the DEA. It just seems like this isn't an actual thing or a problem, because most drug dealers like money and staying out of the way of the police.
You know what, I have to bring it up again because the last time Waz and I were together, we were talking about another issue similar to this. The FDA was very upset about the trend of NyQuil chicken. No one's cooking chicken in NyQuil. Someone posted one TikTok as a joke. It wasn't even trending on TikTok. They made a huge deal about it. I would say you call that lean cuisine. I think that's a very good joke about the NyQuil chicken. But seriously, these people are so bored, right?
Yeah.
Like they're ignoring the real problems in our society. Maybe if you want to solve the problem of fentanyl leading to overdoses, make Narcan more available. Make that the focus. But instead, they just want to cause hysteria among their boomer audience so that they have something to talk about in their Facebook posts. And also the police love talking about fentanyl. As we know, they're still claiming that they're overdosing on fentanyl just by touching it. Look at this tweet from Texas DPS. One of our troopers became ill after being exposed to a substance while conducting a vehicle search in Bexar County. EMS administered Narcan, and the trooper was transported to the hospital. Special agents were able to locate a substance in a container that tested positive for fentanyl. Then we have a doctor who decided to weigh in on this, and Ryan Marino said, "Hi, glad your trooper is okay. But it's not possible to OD on opioids, even potent ones like fentanyl and carfentanil, from being near them or even touching them. If those photos are supposed to help the story, maybe take the Vaseline off the lens. And Narcan is a brand, not an acronym." Really just debunking what the police are putting out there. So what did that officer do to end up overdosing? That's a question for the police department, not for me. But I'm sure we can imagine what went down there. I mean, come on.
God, yeah. Cops sometimes do drugs too, believe it or not. And I think more importantly, when we talk about the profit motive, the way that companies or agencies like the DEA, like certain, other drug war police involved agencies get funding for their efforts, get budgets opened for the things that they want to do, is to drum up this type of public hysteria. And so always be vigilant of the propaganda that's being spun by the people who directly profit from the drug war. Like there are the drug dealers who profit from drugs, but also the cops profit from the drug war as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna share a personal anecdote here, which I don't do a lot, but I know someone in my family, my cousin who I grew up with, had used fentanyl for quite some time, since she was 12. And as of today, she's about 4 months clean. And the type of people who end up using these drugs are not like terrible people. They're usually like very happy people who have a really hard time dealing with how cruel the world is. She was like the kindest, sweetest, brightest person. And a lot of the times the people who end up getting hooked on these drugs are treating a pain they have inside of themselves. And we're really never gonna be able to fully address the extent of the opioid crisis unless we make the world a little bit of a better place for people to live.
Beautifully said.
Thank you, Waz. we have a lot more for you in the bonus episode. We're really excited to talk about some interesting things. We've got the Try Guys, which is something I had never heard of, so we're gonna get into that. And anti-Italian discrimination, something that I am uniquely equipped to discuss as an Italian American. Become a member. We'll see you on the other side.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started,